one of the themes I find myself keeping coming back to is to do with how the structure of certain sensory modalities provide templates for the structuring of other information, other kinds of knowledge, to make that knowledge comprehensible. And here I'm kind of leaning partly on conceptual metaphor theory, I guess, people like Lakoff and Johnson, but others in that kind of general area of experiential philosophy, embodied cognition, leaning over into cognitive linguistics. And as I say, what I'm interested in there is that the structure, let me just get this right in my own mind, that the structure of phenomenal experience as experienced through those different sensory modalities, as I say, provide structure for other kinds of knowing that may not be quite so immediately obvious. And it's one of the tenets of embodied cognition that, or as it plays out in understandings of metaphor, for example, that we are not, well, the only way we can understand abstract concepts is by the application of metaphorical mappings to those concepts. Understand the abstract in terms of the concrete, in other words. There's several things come out of that. One is to do with, some things follow from that. That a close analysis of the structure of particular sensory modalities should, in theory, reveal those kind of forms within abstract structures. And also things like the relationships between sensory modalities. That's quite a long way down the line of my thinking yet. I haven't got that anywhere near that yet. But one of the things I'm just thinking about right now is in relation to the visual sense, which seems to be the dominant sense. I read somewhere that something like 40 or 50% of the brain's functioning is given over to processing of visual information. Or I should probably say the visual processing of information, not, it doesn't really matter. So the visual sense is very important, but visuality, visualization, seeing, has structure. And I've mentioned some of those structures before. Things in the distance are smaller than things close up. In certain kinds of alignment positions, things at a distance will be occluded by things closer up. And then there's a whole series of kind of inactive relationships you can form with those seen objects, if you like, or seen events. If you move slightly to one side, alignments of objects change. If you rise in the vertical dimension, you get access to greater amounts of visual experience. So those things are relatively consistent, and those things, I think, those are some of the things which give structure to the visual mode of sensing. What am I thinking of? Well, what I'm thinking about right now is just that there are some, I feel, what I'm thinking of as kind of prototypical visual experiences, out with the variables. I guess those ones I've just mentioned are kind of prototypical, but the ones I'm thinking of specifically are to do with the horizontal and the vertical, which again I've mentioned before, but I think it's just worth coming back to for myself at least. Obviously I live in Cheshire, so I have a great deal of access to the horizontal dimension, by which I mean I can see the horizon an awful lot. But I think even if I didn't, unless I lived underground or in a city or in a very densely wooded or forested area, I would spend a lot of my time with my visual field divided into two, with a certain kind of open part at the top and a more closed part at the bottom. And this horizontal line dividing my experience into those two broadly distinguishable areas. And I think there's various structural elements follow from that. But I think in addition to that, we also have this, the idea of the vertical is also a prototypical experience, and brings with it certain entailments in the same way that the horizontal line of the horizon brings certain entailments. And this vertical dimension is particularly interesting, I think. At least it's the one I've just been exercising myself with in the last few minutes of this walk. Because in an odd way, I think, verticality, which we see all around us, all the trees I'm looking at around here, they all grow vertically, forming this perpendicular to the horizon. All the grass that's around asserts itself vertically. Most of the man-made structures, I can see power lines in the distance, and the kind of what do we call them, pylons supporting the power lines are all kind of rigorously vertical. Even dead trees, like this particularly attractive dead tree here, is still pushing against the kind of demand of the horizontal and making this vertical. And I think there is something about that verticality which is quite well, I keep finding myself using words like assertives and struggle and resistance, because there is something. It's not unnatural, that would be an incorrect statement, but there is something almost poignant about the vertical. It is the line that's described by objects on their way to the earth, to their final resting place, if you like, when you drop something on the ground. That's the line it describes through space before it hits the ground and ends that particular small journey. So there's something very temporal about the vertical. It seems to have it has its own end built into it. It seems to me, things that are upright seem like they're doomed at some point to fall, and the longer they stay upright, the more they kind of assert their liveliness, I suppose. And I say liveliness because I think one of the prototypical vertical objects is us as human beings. A figure in a landscape is the ultimate perpendicular, it seems to me, and it does kind of typify that sense of resistance and that sense of strangeness, I suppose, oddity. To be upright, you have to be rooted, or you have to be perfectly balanced, or you have to be dynamic, or you have to be alive. And the more vertical you are, the more unlikely a vertical you describe, the narrower your base, the higher your center of gravity, the weaker your foundations, if you like, the more of a struggle you've got, and the more risky you are, the more entropy you're containing, and the more that your continued existence in that vertical is a kind of celebration. And it's like two fingers to the horizontal world, really. Which makes me think about, and I don't want this to sound disrespectful, but it makes me think about the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers. Just shortly after that, George Lakoff wrote a short essay on the kind of symbolic impact of that attack, in which he talked about the Twin Towers being as kind of describing or symbolizing people. That shape, that large figure, that large object standing, is very familiar to us as the figure of a man, or as the figure of a human being. And so so in a kind of poetic sense, for him, the Twin Towers represent these two individuals standing at the gateway to the continent. Either as kind of Walmart greeters or as security guards or something, but they have this kind of symbolic status, and so felling these two objects is an enormously powerful act, because it doesn't just end the lives of a whole bunch of people. It doesn't just disrupt the local environment, nor does it just make people feel nervous about going to work. It has this great symbolic attack on verticality itself, the assertion, which those buildings represent. It'd be hard to find two more buildings like that have such a high center of gravity, that look so unlikely as objects, that are so clearly not of the world of the horizontal. These are of the world of the vertical, and they have all that kind of aspirational quality that you find in vertical objects and that you find in people. I've heard that kind of act, the act of the terrorists who do that, referred to as poetic terrorism, which again sounds totally disrespectful, but I don't mean it in terms of poetry being this kind of fanciful stuff that you find between the pages of certain small publication presses. I'm really talking about poetics there, being that process by which the structure of perception, the structure of our sensory modality, becomes available to us and structures our conceptual understanding of the world.